Through you, Mr. Chair, I requested to speak tonight again because my concerns seem to broaden each time I watch, participate, or read about council in the media, not just our local media, now our international media. It's not just one councillor, although one councillor did seem to demand a lot of our attention. At the May 18th council meeting, without exaggeration, I was almost ill. Mr. Chair, I had spoken to you about the lack of respect I have seen by council members and audience members at public meetings, and May's council meeting was no exception. I witnessed two council members roll their chairs back and have a sidebar conversation for several minutes with laughter ensuing as Jerry Shotput, Chief Capital Officer, and Aaron Moraz, Director of Communications and Community Relations from Metrolink, presented their plan to council. These two councillors must know all there is to know about a multi-million or even billion-dollar investment in Niagara. Not too long after that, our Integrity Commissioner was called upon to answer questions about the Code of Conduct and his investigation into formal complaints of certain council members. I can only describe the line of questioning he received as embarrassing. I am not sure if any members of council watch back these council meetings, but I would suggest that some of you do. I watched for minutes as a councillor quoted a thesaurus to understand a relatively simple word that currently exists in the Code of Conduct for regional councillors, a document that John Mascarin did not write. Not long after that, that same councillor, I can only describe it as chirped, for lack of a better word, another councillor under her breath. Having met with this woman on several occasions, I was surprised she would act in this manner, as I have come to expect more from her. Impose was a word that several councillors could not get past. One councillor was very concerned and spoke at length about his love for the Toronto Maple Leafs and how that could initiate a formal investigation if he dared tweet about his support for his team. I found this to be beyond offensive. His comparison of a tweet about a hockey game to formal complaints regarding tweets intended to spread hate and isolate segments of our community is both foolish and insulting and very deserving of an apology. And here's the thing about an apology. It only holds weight if the apology is not forced, and if the word if, should not appear, as in if I offended you. And the apology should be followed by a change in behavior. Not long after that, I witnessed another councillor address John Mascarin, and at this point, I will admit that it took almost everything in my power not to interject. He began his address by stating that he didn't read the Integrity Commissioner's reports because he believed it would be a waste of time. Had I been in your shoes, Mr. Chair, I would have asked the councillor to sit down, remind all the councillors that it is an expectation of their role to come prepared for each meeting because it is the job we have paid them to do. But he was allowed to proceed, boasting about his motion to remove the Integrity Commissioner altogether because he feels that this council can govern themselves. I would be interested to know, as he was, how much time and therefore money has been spent correcting this motion that is passed. He then proceeded to virtually interrogate Mr. Mascarin. Again, I was beyond embarrassed by our region's representation, calling Mr. Mascarin a fraud repeatedly, raising his voice in an attempt to intimidate Mr. Mascarin. I would like to remind this council that our Integrity Commissioner, John Mascarin, is a contracted employee of the Niagara region. What I witnessed was the definition of workplace harassment and should be treated as such. This councillor's intent was to demean our Integrity Commissioner. Maybe he wanted to make him look foolish, I'm not sure, but thankfully Mr. Mascarin showed class and gave the councillor respect. Mr. Chair, I do wish you had interjected. Our regional clerk has distributed an information sheet for you to review on my behalf. The Ministry of Labour has summarized workplace violence and harassment, and 2 points stand out to me. Making remarks or innuendos that demean, ridicule, intimidate, or offend. And the second one, which you may see that is also very timely, is displaying or circulating offensive pictures or materials in print or electronic form. Could any one of you argue that some council members, have not displayed these behaviors recently? In the past 2 years, I have seen several senior staff who are valued employees leave their position, and that is a huge red flag for me. Not too many years ago, the Niagara region installed security key passes to keep them safe from harassing council members, as I understand it. And still this behavior continues. It continues publicly with puffed up chests and the arrogance that we as citizens can do nothing to stop them. Well, I don't agree. I am certain that the councillors I reference know who they are, and their actions represent the worst qualities in human beings, a sense of imagined entitlement. Finally, the amount of latitude, Mr. Chair, that you and council that you have given the councillor who's on leave, and having worked is astonishing. Having worked in social services for my entire career, I learned that our clients are telling us only part of the story or the tip of the iceberg. This will continue to worsen unless council as a whole can commit to behaving better, to following a code that protects the interests of residents of our region, not creating a code that protects each of your interests. I believe that logic to be absurd. But I know that you have consciously decided to put your needs ahead of ours until this point. So prior to accepting a code written by those who must adhere to it, I will again ask you to consider your role, your influence, and adopt a code that will hold you to the higher standard of behavior as you represent Niagara.